So, a few weeks ago, I made a video debunking many of SK Comics' criticisms on Spider-Man Far From Home. He described it as being the worst Spider-Man movie, which is just a flat-out lie and is wrong. So I decided to rebuttal his points. And now he's just recently made a response video, and it's just bad. Hell, I'd say it's even worse than his Far From Home video. So, let's see how SK defends his dumpster fire of a critique. First, he starts by trying to rebuttal my point on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 being worse.
Sure, those movies were hot garbage, but they're not as bad as Far From Home. Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 have a significantly lower amount of plot holes, and the plot holes that they do have do less damage to the plot. Peter's character in this movie is just as bad as his character in TASM 2, since both of them suffer from making really dumb decisions to the point of being out of character, while suffering some severe character assassinations. Spider-Man 3 isn't perfect in handling Peter's character, but he's leagues more consistent than what they've done in those two movies.
Of course, Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 are worse movies. Far From Home has one coherent and easy to understand plot about Spider-Man trying to stop the maniacal Mysterio and his illusion tech, whereas The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 have 4 to 8 different plot lines that don't correlate with each other at all. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, we have Peter riding off the heels of The Amazing Spider-Man 1 after he made a very selfish and out-of-character decision. This film ups this by the ante by having Peter insist on ditching New York to live in London with Gwen. And on top of that, he was going to leave behind his dying friend Harry without even trying to find a solution to his problem. Not to mention, we have a whole plot with Electro, Harry Osborn, Peter's dad, Oscorp's shady business dealing, and set up for another movie. Does Far From Home have any of these plot lines? No. It is much more condensed in comparison. Spider-Man 3 suffers from multiple plotline issues, and is just overly contrived, and has villains appear, disappear, reappear when the film needs them to. It also does the worst possible plot twist imaginable, just so they can tie Sandman to Peter's internal conflicts. But this twist had no build-up, and is just an excuse to give off the illusion of emotional storytelling, whereas Far From Home does not suffer from these issues. One thing I like to address is that your issues mostly stem from nitpicks, like why did Peter have his homemade costume if he didn't have a motion capture suit on? These things are minuscule, but you treat it as if they're the spawn of Satan. These types of issues don't break the film in any way, which is why I didn't focus on them in my initial video. I focused on some of the major criticisms. I find it funny that SK constantly says video length is not a valid complaint when it comes to reviews or responses, but whines about my video being too short. But whatever. Let's continue with his video.
It's not just in my eyes. These things are provable. The film is objectively bad.
It has nothing to do with objectivity or subjectivity. There are objective things to judge about a film, like lighting, editing, composition. But when it comes to what people find merit in, it's completely subjective. Yes, SK. It's all in your eyes. There are objective things to look at in a movie. But whether those things affect the film's quality for people indeed subjective, you're coming off as someone who believes all of his opinions to be fact. And I hate to break it to you, SK, but none of your opinions on whether a film is good or bad is a fact. Stop trying to enforce this on others. Stop trying to be the one who knows all, because you are not. So, let's continue.
Because Nick Fury,
who happens to be the most paranoid and most dangerous person on the planet,
has means of locating any person in the world due to his access to satellites, cameras, people's personal records and information, you name it. That's how he was able to track down Tony, Cap, or anyone else he needs to recruit or speak to. I mean, he literally did so in Peter's class trip, and that's not even the real Nick Fury, although he certainly has the same tools and resources as Nick Fury, so there's that.
Yes, Nick Fury and Talos could do these things given the resources they have, but would there be any reason for them to do that? They see mysterious elements appear and Beck is trying to stop them. That's more than enough evidence needed to know Beck is on their side. They couldn't have possibly predicted that Beck is using some illusion tech this whole time. They have no reason to be suspicious of him, and using Winter Soldier as an example of why they should be is just dumb. Beck has proven himself to be a hero, whereas S.H.I.E.L.D's compromise works under different contexts. Let's also not forget Fury told Peter that he has no team ever since the blip. We're told Fury that S.H.I.E.L.D. isn't what it's used to be. It's much smaller and has less resources, but SK seems to be going off the assumption that S.H.I.E.L.D. still has all the resources present from the Avengers, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Age of Ultron, when the film literally tells us that's not the case. My doppelganger argument was there as an added scenario for if Fury and Talos would have dug deeper into Beck's background. Obviously, Beck has a team and resources needed to hide his past and make two versions of himself. So your argument still isn't valid. None of these are issues, and do make sense within the context of the film, but let's see how he debunks my other criticisms.
Beck using his technology to cover his ass by creating his own doppelganger would rely on the knowledge that S.H.I.E.L.D. is investigating who he is. If S.H.I.E.L.D. was investigating him, why would they reveal that to Beck? That only gives him the chance to cover his tracks if he is lying about his story. And presenting this solution implies he didn't prepare for this at all, which was the crux of my argument.
This is what I call a straw man. Nowhere did my hypothetical work under the notion that S.H.I.E.L.D. told Fury they were running an investigation on him. It was working under the pretense that Beck found out, and he was being investigated, one way or another. Like his team being very observant of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s actions from the shadows, or something along those lines. But I guess it's easier to argue against your arguments your opponents never made.
My argument in that specific clip was in regards to Beck's planning. Even then, the Skrulls have basic common knowledge and have a basic understanding of how S.H.I.E.L.D. works, considering they've been working for Fury for years. In fact, they should be aware of the major events of Winter Soldier, which quite literally consisted of bad guys pretending they're good guys. Sound familiar? And if the Skrulls are this incompetent, not only does Beck's plan rely on a major plot contrivance, but it's out of character for Fury to trust such incompetent people to deal with the Elementals and a new hero, especially considering his major trust issues.
At no point in the film is it established Talos disguised as Fury for 5 years after he snapped out of existence. They haven't even fully touched on that situation. This argument is based off assumptions rather than what's actually told us in the film. You could make the argument that some of Talos' expositionary dialogue imply he's had experience, but I could make the argument that he did this only to further disguise himself as Fury. Again, we don't know the ins and outs of the situation.
If they're going to show Peter weirded out by her seemingly unattractive and borderline creepy and unlikable personality, then yes. Just telling us that out of the blue he's suddenly attracted to her without any build-up or development makes this forced.
Look, SK. Many series and TV shows have used the concept of time jump before, leaving it to the audience imagination to infer something happened. In the original Star Wars trilogy, we skip over a lot, and don't know much about Anakin's character. We aren't shown stuff about him, but we are rather told about him, similarly how we are told Peter now likes MJ. The prequels didn't come till much later, to further flesh this out, but the prequels aren't needed to make the trilogy feel complete, because based off the information we are subtly give, we can fill that missing link ourselves. Using your standards, if the Clone Wars and prequels never happened, would the assault on the Jedi that wiped them all out be underdeveloped and considered a flaw since it isn't fully elaborated on in this trilogy? It leads to questions like, how did the Jedi get wiped out? How did the Emperor rise to power? What army did it have? Without the prequels, we wouldn't have known Palpatine was the Chancellor, and was slowly rising to power while the Jedi were his puppets. Despite the original trilogy not going in depth on this, it still makes sense and creates a cohesive narrative. The trilogy is still complete. So yes, time is a valid argument for changes in characterization, character relationships, and changes in world building on setting. Now, on to SK's next criticism.
Yeah, I never said that in the video. The only established means of creating illusions that can react on the spot is through the use of motion capture suits, a method of which I acknowledged. However, the crux of my argument is that there's several instances where the motion capture suits weren't used for illusions that were able to react on the spot.
He throws a little jab at the audio quality, which is fair. Then he goes on to defend his points on Mysterio's illusion tech. So if you're aware that some are pre-recorded and others are not, why would you question that some react on the spot while others don't? Seems like you're contradicting yourself here, SK. Then he says I can't use the mocap argument. For some reason, even though it's part of the film. You're essentially asking me not to defend the film by using stuff that's established in it. God, this video is such a mess. And that's pretty much it. SK kindly gave me a shout out for my Batman Begins response video, which should be coming out very soon. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time.